Our guest today is Angie Blackshear of Dalton. She is a criminal court judge, Division II. Welcome, Your Honor. We're very glad that you're here.
Good morning, and thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so happy to see you and all of our friends throughout the city.
Well, so usually, and people who watch this this community conversation know that usually I ask something irrelevant for the first couple of minutes as we're letting people in, and it's usually about something behind you on your wall, but
my blinds.
There are blinds.
My neighbor's house is behind me.
Okay, so I can't ask you really about the blinds, but I will ask you about, I saw you this morning already at a, what they were calling Pancakes and Politics.
Yes.
And this was an event so that people who are running for office could get up and introduce themselves, and that's why you were there.
Yes, absolutely.
And it was actually kind of fun to be at the farmers market that early.
It was. I always enjoy going to the farmers market.
Love going to the farmers market. And what I didn't realize, because we had to leave a little early to get back here for the show, was that I mean, I've been to the farmers markets many times, and particularly on weekends, but they were setting up, there was a whole bunch of different setups going on that I hadn't seen before. Outside in the far side, there were, I mean, it was I've always known that it's been kind of like a flea market, but there were lots and lots of vendors setting up for this today.
Yes.
So I would recommend that everybody after this show, not before it's over, but after the show is over, that everybody go to the farmers market, because it looked like there was a lot of stuff that they were selling today.
And if I can add to that, Jim, I grew up in Nashville, and when I was a little girl, most Saturdays, probably not every Saturday, but most Saturdays, my family and I would go to the farmers market, I think then we called it the open air market, where we would just go from vendor to vendor. We would get our food, our produce that my grandma would prepare for her Sunday dinner, and visit the other vendors to just get items. It was always a fun thing to do when I was a little girl. And I've taken my son a few times. I probably don't go as much now as I used to, but it is a great place to go.
I really do like going. And when I was working downtown more, I would go to the farmers market every so often. Yes. And so I know a lot of the vendors down there during the regular week. Yes. But this looked like it was going to be a tremendous amount of fun today. So hopefully the weather warms up a little bit, and everybody, the sun, it's not out right now, but maybe it comes back out. Even so, I'd go down there just because it looks like it's fun.
Absolutely.
When I could sneak back down there today and see what was going on. Well, it is 10:03, so we can get started. Good morning, everybody. It's a chilly Saturday in April the 2nd, and we are glad everybody's here. We've got our county clerk, Brenda Wynn. I saw her this morning. She was up early down there at that Politics and Pancakes breakfast. So Brenda's on the call. We have a city council meeting this week. It is set for Tuesday night. I think I saw that the calendar was like 47 pages long. It's going to be a long one. It's public hearing night, so we have a lot of discussion on zoning issues. I've been told that we're going to be there for a while on Tuesday night. So if you want to, come on down, or you can watch this on television. Should be interesting. We'll see what happens. Our guest today again is Angie Blackshear Dalton. She is one of our criminal court judges in Division II, and all the judges are up for election this time.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's, I can say that you're running unopposed, so that's why you were able to be on our show. We always try to be careful, and if we had all the judges that were running on our show, we would go on until probably 2026. Judges running, but I will say one thing. This is important. These races are important.
Absolutely.
And there are a lot of very highly qualified people running, like my guest today. And you know, a number of these races are contested. This one is not, but a number of them are. And so I would take the time to go learn about the candidates, because these races are important. These are the judges that we're electing, and you know, whether you like electing judges or not, that's the way we're doing it. And take the time to find out who these folks are. Okay. So, Your Honor, first question to all my guests is tell me a little bit about yourself. Where were you born? Where'd you go to school? What have you been doing all this time before you became judge?
Okay, thank you so much. And as I mentioned a moment ago, I am a native Nashvilleian. Grew up in Nashville, grew up in the Bordeaux area. Attended, I always like to give a shout out to my high school. I attended Whites Creek High School. After graduating from Whites Creek, I went to college, undergraduate studies at Lane College in Jackson, Tennessee. After doing that, I came back to Nashville, took a year off between my undergraduate studies and law school, and I worked for, I'm sure many of you know, attorney Susan Short Jones. I worked as her assistant. I took a year off so that I could work and save a little money, and also just kind of get a little more acclimated to what a career in the legal community would be. And that was a great experience working with Attorney Jones, who I have such a great deal of respect for. And, you know, she served as my mentor during that time. And I learned a lot while working for her during that year. At that time, she was in a very small, she was the lead attorney in a very small firm that did primarily transactional work, no litigation, which is interesting because I ended up going into litigation and criminal laws as a prosecutor. But that was a tremendous opportunity for me to really get an understanding of what a career in the legal community would look like, what it would be like, you know, because very often what we see on television, you know, we see the glamour of, you know, and the drama of what happens in the courtroom, but we don't get to see what happens behind the scenes, the reality of a career in the legal profession. And then the other thing that we don't always see that Hollywood does not portray are the various types of law that's out there for people to practice in. And, you know, as I said, Attorney Jones at the time was doing transactional work. And I'm sure a lot of people are like, well, what does that mean? You know, when I think of lawyer, I think of Perry Mason. So that was a great experience. And so I did work with her for a year, went to law school at the University of Toledo in Ohio, was up there for 3 years. It was really cold and I was ready to come home. So after I finished law school, and I will say this, and again, this is, I credit my experience with Attorney Jones with also opening doors and giving me opportunities to meet other people and get to know other people. It was through her that during law school, when I would come home over the summers, it was because of my association with her that I was able to get an internship at the Tennessee Supreme Court with Justice Adolfo A. Birch. Talk about opening doors. That was a phenomenal experience and a phenomenal opportunity for me. And I say that because this is really key. This is really important. Working for Attorney Jones and doing transactional work, I kind of had in my mind going into law school that was probably the avenue that I would take, right? Well, then when I came home, that between my 1L and 2L years of law school, I had the opportunity to intern with Justice Birch at the Supreme Court. And as you know, Justice Birch was a former prosecutor, a former public defender, a former criminal court, General Sessions Court judge, a former criminal court judge, and a former Court of Criminal Appeals judge. Well, as you could tell by his experience, his background was in litigation. He was a criminal, worked in the area of criminal law. So working with him and on the Supreme Court, he primarily wrote the opinions for the criminal cases. So working with him, I had an opportunity to really get my hands on and see what a criminal case looked like, the anatomy of a criminal case. Doing that helped me to kind of change the course of the direction that I was taking. As I said, when I started off, my career path was, when I started law school, my thought was to go into transactional work like what Attorney Jones was doing. But then my internship with Justice Birch had me look at a different approach. And but for that opportunity, I really wonder if I would be where I am today, because doing that after my first the summer between my 1L and 2L years, the summer between my 2L and 3L years, I actually interned with the district attorney's office in Blount County. And I was able to receive a limited license where I practiced under the supervision of a licensed attorney. So I actually tried cases in the DA's office in Blount County. And that really gave me, I guess, the insight into what I really wanted to do as a lawyer. And so after I finished law school in Toledo, I came back to Nashville and accepted a position with the district attorney's office here in Nashville, where I prosecuted an array of types of cases. I spent some time handling cases in juvenile court, which was really, really important. It was a very eye-opening experience for me, the 2 years that I spent in juvenile court. I spent the majority of the time that I was in the district attorney's office prosecuting in the family protection unit, where I prosecuted cases involving domestic violence. And that too was a very eye-opening experience. And so, you know, my time in the district attorney's office really helped me to understand and appreciate the very significant role that we as attorneys, whether you are a prosecutor, whether you are a defense attorney, or whether you're whatever attorney you are, it really helped me to understand the roles that we have in helping our communities on so many different levels. As a prosecutor, I had a job to do. As a defense attorney, the attorneys have jobs to do. You, Jim, you have a job to do as an attorney in making sure that we're doing what we have to do in order to keep our community going and in a positive light. I say that because during that time in the DA's office, I really grew, gained an appreciation for how the decisions that I made in terms of how I was going to handle a case, prosecute a case, pursue a case, how it was not going to only impact the person, the defendant who was before the court who was being prosecuted, but impact the victims of the crime, how it was going to impact our communities as a whole. And I really appreciated that, because it opened my eyes and it helped me to become a better lawyer. So I was in the DA's office for I guess it was about 8 years, when one of the General Sessions Court judges, Judge Bill Feynman, announced that he was retiring. And so I thought, you know what, what I've done in the DA's office is so important, but I felt that I had so much more to offer the community, so much more to offer the community. And I knew that I could utilize the skills that I developed as a prosecutor in an enhanced way to do more in our community. And so I decided to run for judge when Judge Feynman announced that he was retiring. And so, and thankfully the voters of Davidson County saw something in me and elected me in 2006. And so I was General Sessions Court judge from 2006. And, you know, again, just handled, presided over countless numbers of cases. And while in the DA's office, and as I mentioned earlier, I spent some time in the DA's office in the family protection unit. And I think that helped to shape my motivation to, along with other judges in the General Sessions Court, to develop a specialized domestic violence docket, which we started, I believe, in 2014, which was presided over then by Judge Allegra Walker, Judge Gail Robinson, and myself. But that was my time in General Sessions. And in 2017, Judge Randall Wyatt announced that he was retiring. And so I thought, can I do something more? I enjoyed my time in General Sessions Court. I thought that the work that we, all of us as judges, that all over Davidson County, but especially in General Sessions Court, because as you know, Jim, that's like General Sessions is, I don't know, they call it the people's court, because that's where most of the cases come, and that's where, you know, the rubber meets the road. And but I knew that I had cultivated something with that experience that I thought I could do something even more with. And so when Judge Wyatt announced his retirement, I sought the appointment by former Governor Bill Haslam, was appointed and subsequently elected to retain the seat. And so here we are. Is that all? Did I talk too much?
No, no,
Oh.
I was interested. Usually what I do is I just listen and then I start going like, I wonder about this part. Because I was going to ask you what you did between your second and third year of law school, and you went to Blount County and practice. You know, and then I was thinking, when I was going through, I did before I started law school, I worked in the public defender's office for a summer. And then I worked Juvenile Legal Aid Society between my first year and second year. And between my second and third year, I worked for a small law firm downtown that did everything. Anything that kind of came in the door did everything. And then ended up working for Chancellor Brandt right when I got out of law school in the Chancery Court here in Davidson County. And I was thinking, you know, I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do. I had done a bunch of different things in terms of the practice of law. The first year out, I was foreclosing on people, which is not what I really wanted to do. Then I got offered a chance to go work at the state for then Governor McWhorter and David Manning, the finance director, as the legal counsel at the Department of Finance. And Patsy Cottrell was my mentor.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Patsy later became a judge. She was a legal director at Metro and then a judge as well. But it was the policy aspect of it. It was looking at statutes, trying to fix statutes and trying to deal with policy that I got interested in. And I think most lawyers, as they're going through all this training, you know, back then, I mean, I think you see more specialized stuff today.
I think so.
Back then it was, you know, we're going to throw you everything and then you kind of figure out where you want to go. And then I guess you get into it and then you kind of practice your way into what you want to do. I think you learned fairly early what it was that you wanted to do. And you also had a really good mentor in George Jones.
Yes.
So anyway, I thought that was really interesting the way you said it. And it almost sounded like an apprenticeship. You know, most lawyers, some people get out of law school and immediately go run off and do a bunch of different things. I always felt it would be helpful to have somebody kind of keeping an eye on you as you get out. Sometimes you're not necessarily ready to practice quite yet.
I agree.
So you and I, after all this is over and we get out of public life, we can start an apprenticeship program for lawyers. How about that?
You know, whenever I have an opportunity to talk to students, whether they're college students or law students, I always stress how important it is to participate in these internship programs, take advantage of those opportunities, which in essence are apprenticeships, but take advantage of those opportunities because number one, like, you know, you develop a skill set within that area that will be beneficial to you throughout your career. But the other thing that you gain from that are those networking opportunities, which is so vitally important. So no, I agree with you. I think that maybe in our next life after public service life, we can do that.
I wrote it down, so I'll remember. Yeah. Let me ask you this, and obviously I know that, you know, you've been at this long enough, you know what you can answer and what you can't. But one of the things that I think is interesting about also what you said in terms of kind of understanding everybody's role in all of this, because everybody does have a role. And sometimes I think people forget that on the outside looking in. So you prosecuted cases, you know, you've been a judge, you understand the role of the people on the defense side. How does that, and this is a difficult question, I guess, to ask, but most people I think don't understand that role. And it shows up every so often when people go, I can't believe that, you know, you defended this person. Or I can't believe that, you know, decisions were made in this form or fashion. And part of that means that I think people don't necessarily understand that in order to make the process work fairly and equitably, that everybody does have a role to play to make sure that this is handled correctly. So for people who are listening, what's the best way to kind of explain that to people?
Yeah, you almost explained it just very well. One thing I developed in a professional sense, really good relationships over the years when I was a prosecutor with members of the criminal defense bar. We always worked well together when as I prosecuted a case and an attorney represented his or her client in a case, we each understood our boundaries. I think the way that I would tell the public is when you look at what a prosecutor does, understand that the role of the prosecutor is one of the many roles is to hold people accountable for their actions, for their conduct, and doing so in a manner that's keeping the public interest, the safety of the public in mind, right? If we did not have criminal prosecutions, no one would be held responsible for bank robberies, for stealing, for killing, for a number of things. On the flip side of that, each person who comes before the court under our Constitution is afforded a right to fairness throughout the process. The role of their attorney, of his or her attorney, the criminal defense attorney, is to make sure that client, that person who is charged with a crime, that they are protected, that their constitutional rights are protected, to make sure. Now, I had a criminal defense attorney tell me this, and it stuck with me because it is so true. The role of that criminal defense attorney is to make sure that the prosecutor and the judge do not abuse their authority and overstep their boundaries when holding someone accountable. And I think the best example that I can probably give you is, I don't know, you have a kid who is arrested for shoplifting a candy bar out of the convenience store. Well, I think justice dictates that an offense like that does not mean that person needs to sit in jail for 30, 40, 50 days of 6 months a year. Justice dictates that. And the role of that defense attorney is to make sure that defendant is treated fairly throughout the process, and to hold the prosecutors accountable, because the district attorney's office, the prosecuting attorneys, have a responsibility. If you're going to accuse someone of a crime, it's your responsibility to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the person committed the crime. You can't just come in and say, well, he's charged with the crime, so he's guilty. The DA's office, the attorneys in the DA's office have the responsibility of bringing forth the evidence that demonstrates that the person charged is guilty of that crime beyond a reasonable doubt. So those are how those, when you look at that balancing test, how those roles play into my role as a judge. I tell people all the time, I'm like the referee in that football game that has on that, my role is that black and white striped shirt. My role is to make sure that both sides are following the rules and as the case proceeds through our court system. So, it bothers me as a former prosecutor and now as a judge. I do get concerned when I hear people say, oh, I can't believe that, why is that attorney, representing that person? Or, why, they know he's guilty, so why are we even, going through this process? Well, the Constitution says we go through this process, and I gladly, as a judge, will make sure that we go through that process and follow what both sides, the defense and the prosecution, make sure that their constitutional rights are protected as those cases travel through our court system.
I thought it was interesting how you described it as like a referee, or an official. That maybe your robe should have stripes on it.
I know, right?
Because that's what you do. You serve kind of as you're controlling the courtroom action and trying to make sure that everything is done fairly.
The courtroom is my football field.
Yeah, I like that analogy. Okay, let me ask you another question because then we're going to kind of walk through how a case unfolds before,
Okay.
not just
Mhm.
hypothetically. The so let's bring it up, and you may or may not be able to answer this question either, but you may be watching, and that is the review of the Senate of Judge Jackson as she is looking at being confirmed as the first African-American female we've ever had on the Supreme Court.
I just got goose pimples.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's amazing, and
Yes.
maybe you're next. I don't know. We'll see.
Uh-huh.
But so it's you know, I don't know the best way to describe this question. I mean, obviously you want the top quality lawyers and minds on the Supreme Court, because you get an appointment for life. They're making extremely important decisions about interpreting the United States Constitution, which has been upheld, which has been sitting there for over 200 years, close to 250 years. And it's worked. I mean, our founding fathers, one of these days, I mean, every so often we go back and talk about them, but they were brilliant.
Mhm.
Whoever was doing all this, I mean, it's pretty amazing that it's lasted this long. But the Supreme Court, they created that third branch of government to make sure that it was, that the laws were being interpreted correctly. I guess sometimes it pains me, and you can argue on both sides. It's painful sometimes to watch these review processes, because they're not. I mean, I just want to make sure we have good, competent, quality people who have the experience to serve on the court. That's kind of a long way of saying, have you been watching the review of Judge Jackson? And maybe the question is there a better way to check to make sure these people are ready to go and that they're properly before, and then they should go on the court.
Yeah, I watched. I was able to catch some bits and pieces of the Senate confirmation hearings, and listen to many of the questions and Judge Jackson's responses. And as you've identified, the process by which a Supreme Court justice is selected, is what we have, and we have to contend with it. I will say, and I think I can say this, I'm going to say it anyway. I understand why, and this can be on either side of the aisle, because you can see it with any nominee who goes before the Senate. You can see this regardless of whether they were nominated by a Democratic president or Republican president. Obviously, the members of the Senate are going to have their notions, their beliefs, that of what they want in a justice on the Supreme Court for obvious reasons. And so they're going to tailor how that nominee is treated, how the questions that they ask throughout the process. I say all of that to say this: understanding that is the way that the process is set up. It concerns me with how much more political it becomes, as opposed to vetting a nominee for his or her credentials to serve as a Supreme Court justice. I think that's I think is the best way to put it.
Well, I'll ask you one more question on it, and that is, I mean, so I watch this and I go, it's almost like you're running for judge right here. Everybody is limited in a campaign that where we elect judges. You can't. I mean, because your job is to handle what comes before you and handle that. So you can't really campaign on, I'm going to do this and this and this, because your job is to handle the courtroom and make sure that things are done properly and fairly and equitably. And so I watched the proceedings on whatever and on the news, and people are asking questions that a qualified candidate can't answer, because they are because they may have decisions that make in the future and have to decide things. Do you have a way of, is there any response to that? And ladies and gentlemen, she may have frozen up. So Ms. McDaniel, can you hear me?
Yeah, give her a second to log back in.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't the one that.
It wasn't you. Give her a second to log back in. Brenda
Okay.
Wynn, are you available to talk?
You want to just hear me talk?
Well, Jim can ask you a question.
Yeah, did you listen to the question I just answered? That I just asked? I just answered myself.
Tell me the question again.
So the question is, when we're watching, I'm watching on the news Judge Jackson be grilled by individuals, and it happens on both sides. I know it's just this one happens to be going on right now. It's frustrating because if a judge is doing this properly, and I think they, to some extent they have, the judge is doing this properly, they're asked questions that they cannot answer because of judicial ethics, because that would exclude them from cases. So I was asking the judge, and I see that she's getting back on. But Brenda, what do you think when you watch that stuff?
The thing that bothers me is that it's more about grandstanding and not really wanting an answer. And it's difficult. It puts the nominee in a difficult position because, again, they're being asked questions that the questioner typically doesn't even want an answer to. They just want to put something out there. And so I think that we've got to get back to trying to ask relevant questions of people who are nominees for these positions. And I'm going to defer to Judge Dalton because she knows more about the law, but I'm just telling you from a personal perspective how it makes me feel. It makes me a little bit angry that they would ask the questions knowing full well that they don't want answers.
Well, it's almost like you've got people who we're going to put on the highest court in the land, and their hands are tied behind their back. They can't answer the question. Okay, so Judge Dalton was there a minute ago, and now I think I've lost her again. She must be still getting back on.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. There you are.
Okay, I don't know what happened, but my computer, it just shut off on me. That's the downside. And now my camera won't turn on.
Well, that's okay. We see a lovely picture of you, and we can hear you, so you're fine.
Okay, and I apologize for that. I don't know what happened. My computer just turned off. I don't know what happened, but
Brenda Wynn answered the question for you, but I don't know if you remember the question I was asking. It was watching Judge Jackson try to address questions that she's not allowed to answer, and then everybody gets mad when she answered. Well,
I think that Ms. Wynn just I was able to hear her response to the question, and I think she said it very eloquently. Many of the members of the Senate, they know what can be asked. They know the limitations of what judges can respond to. But just as Ms. Wynn just said, very often it's done for their own personal gain, and not in furtherance of vetting this nominee's qualifications to serve as a judge. And that's the whole purpose. That was why the process was designed for that, to vet the qualifications of the nominee to serve, as you stated earlier, on the Supreme Court. It's a lifetime appointment. And are you prepared can you do this? Are you competent to do this? are you prepared to do this? But as Ms. Wynn said, very often those questions, you know, I've got to be careful. I won't go into some of the exact comments and questions that were made throughout the Senate confirmation hearings. But, you know, there was sometimes I would hear a question and I would just, you know, shrug my shoulders, roll my eyes, and let out a big huff puff because number one, I knew that Judge Jackson could not answer the question. And number two, the members of the Senate who asked the questions knew it to begin with, but it was for their personal gain. I will say this, one thing that I appreciated, one thing that I gained and from watching, well, I gained a number of things, but in watching the Senate confirmation hearings, and I really gathered an appreciation for was Judge Jackson's demeanor throughout the process. She handled the questions with grace. She demonstrated what we call a very appropriate judicial temperament. And that is what we expect of judges. I've often said that unlike politicians and some of the other types of political races or other political positions, judges are a lot different. I do not consider myself a politician. I'm not a politician. I engage in the political process in order to get the job, I guess, so to speak. But beyond that, I am not a politician and I'm not a policymaker. My role is to make sure that my role is to make sure that the public understands, those who are going to be voting for me, make sure that they understand that I am going to be a fair and impartial judge for each and single case that comes before me, that I'm going to look at each case on its own individual merits and render what is an appropriate, fair, and just decision, and do so in an impartial manner. And that is what that is a part of what judicial temperament is about. And that was one thing that I definitely appreciated with Judge Jackson's presentation throughout the Senate confirmation hearings.
I think that's a very important statement because I noticed it too, because I mean, you may not be in politics, but you're in it because of the fact that judges here have to run. It's the same thing for anybody else who is either in public life or who gets called and has to testify in terms of like in front of a legislative body or anything else. Sometimes those questions can be difficult. And
absolutely,
you're watching, you know, sometimes you're going like, I can't believe they just asked that. And then the next thing you're looking at is the person who's supposed to answer. And you're looking for kind of the way that they handle it. And I think it's a very important point to know.
Yes.
All right. So, well, let's go on because I want to go through, last week on the show, we had Ricky Rooker, who was talking about the process of being the circuit court clerk and all the things that people show up for and are trying to find. Tell people who are watching kind of what happens with the case. And I'm not talking about a specific case. What I'm talking about is kind of an overview of a case that gets brought to you. How does it get to your courtroom? Mm-hmm. And then kind of, if you can kind of explain what you're seeing as the case moves through, and then, could get settled. Maybe it goes on to a jury trial. Just kind of explain the process to people who aren't familiar with how this works.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I'll start with an arrest. Okay. And then I'm going to explain something else, but I'm going to start with an arrest. Okay. So let's say that Bobby Joe is arrested for, I'm going to choose a felony offense. Let's say car theft. Okay. When Bobby Joe is arrested, he's going to first go before the night court commissioner and the police officer or whatever witness is going to be necessary for the night court commissioner to determine whether or not there's probable cause to issue a warrant. That process will happen at night court. The night court commissioner or the magistrate will then, if a determination of probable cause to issue the warrant is met, will issue the warrant, will set a bond, and I won't go into all those details. We could talk about, I know the bond and maybe something you want to talk about later on, but I won't go to the details of how the commissioner sets the bond. But let's say the commissioner, based upon the nature of the offense and Bobby Joe's record, if Bobby Joe has one, sets a bond amount at, I don't know, let's say $2,500, $2,500. That's probably an amount that Bobby Joe can or cannot post, but let's just say he's able to post bail. So then the case is going to end up on a docket in General Sessions Court. It's going to go through a few docket phases in General Sessions Court, but at some point the General Sessions Court judge is going to have a preliminary hearing, and that is when more proof is presented, and Bobby Joe's attorney will have an opportunity to cross-examine the police officer at that point. After all of that proof is presented, the General Sessions Court judge would then determine if there's probable cause for the case to go to the grand jury. So let's say that the General Sessions Court, after hearing all the proof, determines that there is sufficient probable cause for the case to proceed to the grand jury. Well, then the case goes to the grand jury for yet another probable cause finding. The grand jury is a body of 12 members of the community who will hear facts of a case, usually just presented by the prosecuting agent, probably the police department or law enforcement, who will present some facts. And the grand jury would make a determination based upon whatever information is presented to them to return an indictment. Okay, if the grand jury determines again.
Look, we may have lost her again.
Uh-oh, can you hear me?
No, now I got you again.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I don't know what's wrong with my video. It just won't. It's not. But anyway,
it's a great picture.
Oh, thank you. But if it's a lot of probable cause findings, right? So you got the magistrate, you have the General Sessions judge, and then you have the grand jury. The grand jury makes a probable cause determination that whether or not to return an indictment. So once the grand jury does its own investigation, usually involving evidence presented by law enforcement or other witnesses that they deem necessary, they return an indictment. Well, the indictment is what comes to us in criminal court. So it goes through all of those steps before it gets to us in criminal court. So once the grand jury returns an indictment, the case is set on my docket in criminal court for an arraignment. That is when the defendant is formally charged with that car theft. Okay. I will make a determination as to whether or not, and if Bobby Joe cannot afford to hire an attorney, I would then have a very quick hearing for me to determine whether or not he's indigent and whether or not I should appoint an attorney to represent him. I will appoint an attorney to represent him if he's indigent. And then the case will go through a series of docket settings. After the arraignment, the defense attorney will very likely file a motion for discovery of evidence. Discovery of evidence is the state is required to turn over to the defense all evidence that they have that demonstrates that Bobby Joe committed the offense of car theft. It could be witness testimony, photographs, I don't know, maybe they found fingerprints in the car, whatever evidence they have. I'll list all the witnesses, whatever evidence they have, they're required to turn that over to the defense, because the defense attorney, it needs to have that conversation with his or her client to let them know, look, this is the evidence that the state has against you. The state is going to probably make an offer to you to settle the case. Now, based upon all of this information and based upon the offer, would you be interested? You know, the state may offer, I don't know, 3 years probation. Based upon this evidence, would you like to enter a plea, or would you like for the case to proceed to trial? So we'll have a series of dockets. There may be some motions in between. Sometimes they'll the defense may file a motion to suppress. Maybe Bobby Joe gave a statement to police, but the police didn't read him his Miranda rights or something, or maybe he gave us some sort of another involuntary statement. The defense may file a motion to suppress the statement. The defense may file a motion to suppress some other evidence that they thought that was not constitutionally obtained by by law enforcement. So that we'll go through those series of dockets and motions, and then at some point, the parties will either determine to settle the case. If they settle the case, they will the case will come before me for the plea. I'll make sure that the defendant understands his or her constitutional rights. Case settles. If they don't settle the case, it then gets set on a trial docket, and we'll set it for a jury trial, or he's entitled to a bench trial if he wants a bench trial. I think I've had one bench trial since I've been in criminal court, but most times they want jury trials, and we'll have the trial and bring the jury in, and the trial then kind of unfolds a little bit like what you probably see on Law and Order, but not so much so.
Well, let me ask you, go back through some of this. There are several different divisions of the criminal court.
Yes.
In Davidson County. How does a case get assigned to Division 2?
So under the scenario that I just explained to you, it's according to arrest periods. And it was divided that way just to make sure to hopefully make sure that there was an equitable distribution of the cases. That there are 6 criminal court divisions. So, and I wish I'd brought this home. I should have brought it home. Today is April 2nd. Yesterday was April 1st. Let's just say, for an example, from April 1st through April 15th, that's a 2-week time frame, right? Any person who is arrested during that time frame, if the case, they're arrested and go through that process that I explained to you. Right. If the case makes it through the grand jury, and the grand jury returns an indictment, that defendant's case will go before, for an example, Criminal Court Division 1, that's Judge Steve Dozier. And then from February 16th through whatever that 2-week date is after that, any person arrested will come before me, and then so forth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's not done, I think I remember this in Chancery Court, is that when it depends on when it gets filed, and then it's the next one in line, it's 1, 2, 3, or 4. They may have changed it since this was a long time ago. But
it kind of, now I will say this, and under the scenario that I explained in terms of the arrest, what I explained is how it happens. Now, we do have a process similar to what you explained, and I mentioned to you a few moments ago that cases get to us in 2 different ways. You have that whole scenario where a person is arrested and then case goes to the grand jury. Well, the other thing that we have is what is called a direct presentment. That is, there is no initial arrest, but the grand jury is investigating a case that where there has been an allegation of a crime, but because of the intensity of the investigation, the arrest has not been made. If the grand jury determines that there is probable cause to return an indictment without the arrest, then the case is assigned kind of like what you just described. So let's say the grand jury returns a direct presentment today on case number 1, that'll go to Steve Dozier. They return a direct presentment on Monday in case number 2, that'll come to Division 2, that's me. Then so forth, Division 3, 4, 5, and 6. So those are the 2 different ways that cases are assigned to the criminal court divisions.
Okay, with a direct presentment, when the grand jury is looking at something, that's where there's investigations going on, and people hear that it's in front of the grand jury. Nobody's quite sure what's going on, because the grand jury is private, correct?
That is correct. Yeah, that is correct.
Okay, so if they do a direct presentment, how does that work in terms of getting the individual who is the subject of, I guess, the presentment? How does that person get pulled into court? Okay. That's
a good question. So when a part of the grand jury's job in those instances is to issue. So if they return a direct presentment or return the indictment on a direct presentment, they will also set a bond in the case. And when they set the bond, that is like the issuance of the arrest warrant on that indictment. So once that's set and filed with the clerks, with the bonding office, with the clerk, that warrant is out there now, and then law enforcement will go and pick that person up. Now, I will say this, sometimes, it doesn't happen all the time, sometimes there may have been discussions going on between the prosecutor and the defense attorney, they know that it's coming, so they make the arrangements for the person to turn themselves in. It doesn't happen all the time, but I've seen that. You may have, you may have even heard of that happening in situations where the person said, well, they show up over at the warrant office over at night court to turn themselves in with their attorney standing right there with them. That's because they know that it's on its way, that it's coming. Sometimes it just happens that it's just a warrant out there, and the police department's warrant division will go and find the person and make the arrest. But if there's an I will say this, if there's an investigation going on, I think that there is a chance that the suspect knows that there's an investigation going on, because people are kind of doing that talking behind the scenes. I mean, the police are going to be, if they're investigating Joe Bob for, I don't know, money laundering, they've got to talk to somebody, and that somebody's going to probably reach out to Joe Bob and say, hey, the police just called me about the allegations of this money laundering that, they say that you did.
Well, first of all, it's Bobby Joe, not Joe Bob.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I change his name?
Yeah,
that's his alias.
So
that's his alias.
That's his alias. So Mr. Joe, Bobby Joe, who goes also by Joe Bob. Okay, so I'm going to ask you some random questions because we only got 9 minutes left. And the way I can tell they're really good discussions is that I'm never looking at the clock. I look up just to see that if we got a little bit of time left, and we're almost out of time. But let me just ask you a series of questions that people might find interesting. A bench trial as compared to a jury trial, obviously that doesn't happen very much. Any indication of why somebody would prefer to do a bench trial over a jury trial?
I think sometimes the timing, you may have someone who's just ready to get the case. They're ready to get it. It's a lot easier to get a docket date for a bench trial than it is for a jury trial, because we only have so many jury trial weeks in a calendar year, and they get snatched up pretty quickly. But I could probably go in on Thursday of next week and try a bench trial and be done in a day. But sometimes it's it's timing. I think that they'd rather get the case disposed as quickly as possible. I'm trying to think of some other things that I've heard defense attorneys say.
But it doesn't sound like it happens very often.
It does not happen very often.
Trial. Okay. Tell me this. You're setting jury trials, when it gets to the point where it's ready to go to court and it doesn't look like it's going to settle. So you set the case for trial, and it's a jury trial. How far out at this point? Because I know there's only so many resources and so much time, and you got so many cases going, and some of them are going to take a while. So how do you figure all that stuff? I assume you have a criminal court clerk through whether it's Howard Gentry's office or somebody who is working with you all to try to keep track of when these cases are going to be set and how long you think they may last.
So, and that's exactly where we work really closely. I have a court clerk, my court clerk, who is actually one of the deputies for Mr. Gentry, who along with my staff helps to kind of keep up with the court's calendar. And pre-pandemic, I have to say that pre-pandemic, we were probably setting cases anywhere, just depending on the nature of it, anywhere from 6 months out to almost a year out. Mm-hmm. Since, unfortunately, as we all know, from mid-March of 2020 up until probably the spring of 2021, we did not try any jury trials because of the pandemic, unfortunately. So we had all of those cases that were already docketed, that those trials were canceled, plus we were still getting cases. So we unfortunately had a backlog. I think that we're in a place where the good thing was we really encouraged resolution of those cases. Many of those cases did resolve during that time frame. Some did not. We're still trying some of those pre-pandemic cases. I just tried one this past week. But we are now, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I set a case for jury trial. I think I'm probably now back to kind of doing it within 6 to 9 months. Okay. We were able to just kind of squeeze some things in and encourage people, look, if y'all can settle this, please settle. In the words, I don't know if you ever tried anything in front of in general sessions or went before Judge Leon Rubin in general sessions. I know that you knew who he was, but he would always say, "Can y'all try to resolve this? I'm a lover, not a fighter."
I don't know if he ever told me that, but I don't remember Judge Rubin. So one of the other things that I remember, particularly with judges asking, were how long is this going to last? Because I knew you just I knew you just gone off of a you just had a case before you. Is that something that either you as the judge or the clerk, as you're trying to set cases down the road, because some of these things may last longer than you think, and you don't know how long the jury is going to be out. So do you try to, is there some time frame that you're going like, well, how long do you think this is going to last? And then you're giving yourself enough time because you may have another case coming behind it. Obviously, you do have cases coming behind it.
That is so true. The people who are going to know how long a case is going to last better than me actually are the attorneys, because they know how many witnesses they're going to call. Based upon their experience, they're usually pretty good at gauging how long it will take to examine. For an example, with the trial that I had this week, the attorneys will say, well, I think that this witness will probably be on the stand for 40 minutes. This witness will probably be on the stand for an hour, or this witness may be on the stand for about 50. And they're usually on point because they know the questions that they're going to ask. They know the proof that they're going to get into. So when I set a case for trial, I try to look at, number one, how many witnesses are on the witness, because we should know that. At the point that we're setting the case for trial, we know we have the witness list. How many witnesses are on the witness list based upon the complexity of a case. If I have a 5-witness theft case versus a 28-witness murder case, I know that the theft case is probably going to take a day or two. The murder case may take all week. And the attorneys are going to tell me, Judge, this could possibly take 2 weeks. This may go into the weekend. This may go into the beginning of next week. And so we try to, when we're setting the case for trial, we try to pull all of that information together at that point so that I know, okay, I don't want to set it this week because that's going to go into a holiday, or I already have a case set that following Monday. And if this is going to go into the next week, I can't set it, it's a lot. There are a lot of spokes in the wheel that kind of go into the whole process of getting the case through the court system. And that includes docketing the cases for trial.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so we have time for, I think, 2 more quick questions because I got 2 minutes. So if people are interested in attending and coming down and watching a trial, are they always allowed in?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. We did have some restrictions as a result of the pandemic, but those are lifted now. The courtroom is a public place. I do now, jury selection, I try to limit the people in the courtroom for a number of reasons. Number one is because of space. I'm usually bringing 40 members of the public in for jury selection, and sometimes we just don't have the space. But beyond that, the courtroom is a public place and people are welcome to come in and observe.
Okay. All right. And I think some people do. And I just thought, I thought I would ask. Here's the last question. Because this is, I think this is, I'm a lawyer, but I still think it's fascinating because I don't practice in criminal court, but it's a fascinating process. If somebody were watching this and going like, I want to know more, I want to kind of figure out how, exactly of the process, because you've explained it really, really well. But if somebody was interested in reviewing it, is there a place to go that actually lays all this stuff out, where it says, this is just basically the general process of how a case flows through criminal court?
There may be some resources through the administrative office of the courts. I'll need to check. In fact, I was just recently, I got an email this week asking me to help update a bench book. So I know that there are some resources available, through the administrative office of the courts, I do believe. But I will say this, one thing that the canons of ethics asks of judges the Code of Judicial Conduct it asks of judges to do is to educate the public about the process. And this is why I appreciate opportunities such as this to talk with the members of our community, because it's important. As you've identified, we're in the midst of an election, and it's important for the people to understand what we do, so that they are picking who they believe, or they're electing who they believe are the best judges to do the job.
It's this whole thing is very fascinating, and I guess what I'll end by saying, yeah, it is important. I think it's extremely important for the public to understand this process, and going back to whether it's an election or whether it's a confirmation or whatever, this is extremely important because it's talking about people's life, liberty, all these different aspects that go particularly into a case in a criminal court situation. And it's very important to have the right people in these jobs. And so I am so appreciative of the fact that you're one of our judges.
Oh, thank you.
That you have done this, and that you're willing to take the time this morning to explain this. So again, our guest was Angie Blackshear Dalton, Criminal Court Judge, Division II. Your Honor, always a pleasure. This has been really, really fascinating. I really very much appreciate your time.
And I appreciate, I'll say this, I appreciate the work that you do for the city of Nashville as the vice mayor. And I appreciate that you have opportunities such as this for people to learn about the various aspects of the operation of our city. That is so vitally important. So thank you for both your service as the vice mayor and for this opportunity to talk with you today.
Well, thank you. I very much appreciate it. I will tell everybody, I think we're off for the next 3 weeks. I think we're taking the month of April off because there's too many things going on. There are lots of religious holidays all coming into the month of April. And I think we decided just to, for everybody's sake, to take the rest of the month off. We'll be back in May. But I will say, Your Honor, that we've done these things for a while. And I think, for people who are interested in learning about some of the processes within our government, including the court, it's a good way to kind of get a general overview. So I'm glad we're doing it. I think it's good.
Great job, Judge.
Thank you, Brenda.
Everybody, have a nice several weeks off. Enjoy this weekend. And we will be back soon. And everybody remember that they're supposed to go vote. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks, Tim. Go vote May 3rd. Early voting starts the 13th.
Yeah, there you go. Brenda wins. She's also running, but she's also unopposed. So, thanks, everybody. Everybody be safe. We'll see you soon. Thanks,
Thank
everybody.
you.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye.